ton sang précieux, enlève mon iniquité. Regarde-moi sur les cieux, dis-moi que tu m'as pardonné. J'ai longtemps erré cœur rebelle, mais j'entends ta voix qui m'appelle. Au pied de ta croix maintenant, tout confus, brisé, je me rends. Blanc, blanc, plus blanc que neige, blanc, plus blanc que neige. Lavé dans le sang de l'agneau, je serai plus blanc que la neige. Jésus, par ton sang précieux, enlève mon
Because the Israelites are my servants, whom I brought out of Egypt, they must not be sold as slaves. Do not rule over them ruthlessly, but fear your God. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you and members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property and can make them slaves for life, but you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. Leviticus 25, verses 42 to 46.
Greetings, brothers and sisters. It is my privilege to welcome you to the third episode of God is Not White. My name is Jafrikayiti, and I bring you these greetings from Ottawa, Gatineau, the capital of Canada. Yes, you've heard the news with regards to Prime Minister of Canada quitting, and honestly, that's not what we're going to be talking about today. I wish these were the kind of preoccupations that most people around the world had today. In Haitian Creole, we talk about such folks as Bien-Aimé Saint Jean-Baptiste. So today, for the third episode of God is Not White, we have a very special focus. As some of you who have watched the first two episodes know, this program is essentially based on my book, Vive Bon Dieu à bas religion, Praise God Down with Religion, published in 2000 in Haitian Creole. And on a weekly basis, I propose to go over some of the concepts that were developed in the book pertaining to God, religion, and the relationship of African people, particularly with the Christian religion, which is the most prevalent in the country, in the experience that us Africans who were kidnapped and displaced from the west coast of Africa had to deal with. And so I encourage you, if you find the topic of interest, you certainly know someone else who would also be interested in the topic and who may not already be connected. And so please copy the YouTube link and share it. If it's someone who is on Facebook, encourage them to subscribe to Jafrikayiti, as the name is spelled there, which simply means I'm a son of Africa born in Haiti, a name that I've adopted a few years back for my publications. And so if you are interested to know the legal name that I received when I was growing up in Haiti, it's Jean-Élie Saint-Ville. I specify that because sometimes people misunderstand the adoption of such names, especially by people of African descent. It's not trying to hide our identity. It's actually simply linked to the history that we are describing here, that the name that I've just mentioned, Jean-Élie Saint-Ville, does not describe exactly who I am. And as you know of the experience of Malik Shabazz el-Shabazz, who was born Malcolm Little. He adopted an X for the longest time while doing the research. I am also still involved in doing my genealogy research. And so I will replace Jafrikayiti if I manage to identify the African ancestral names that are more appropriate and adapted to my genealogy. And so that's that. Okay, so please share the link and do not hesitate to comment, ask questions during the presentation. The program lasts 1 hour. We really are doing our best to never go too much over those 60 minutes. And as usual, we will have a slide presentation and with some references. And I'm really encouraging folks to contribute to the conversation via email. So for instance, some of the topics that I will cover today, I will only be giving some examples. There are other examples, such as the Bible verses that you could quote, quote from the Torah, quote from the Quran. Share those with us as you see them fit on the topic of discussion. Likewise, for other books that I will be referencing, I just only have a few references at the end, but please also contribute, as this is a collective learning enterprise. And so today, like I said, the presentation is fairly straightforward, focused on the idea that the Almighty God, the creator of the universe, after having done all of this, has a chosen people. Of all of the people that are in existence, presumably from the same creator, there is a chosen people. Chosen for what purpose? Chosen as opposed to what would you consider the others to be? All of that is what we will be discussing. And so I propose to do this through essentially 4 steps. The first one, to explain how I was introduced to that idea, to that concept. So the storyline as I heard it growing up. As I mentioned in the first presentation, my own itinerary with regards to the concepts of God and all of that came from growing up in Haiti, the son of an Episcopalian priest who himself was the son of another Episcopalian priest. Episcopalians being the US Anglicans, who, as they developed that faith inside of the United States to separate themselves from those of England, called themselves Episcopalian. But as you will see, for Africans in the United States who were enslaved in the early 1800s, it was a very difficult situation for them to be worshiping the same God in the same space as white Episcopalians. And so it is African Episcopalians who established that church in Haiti in the mid 1800s, who are my ancestors. And it is through their experience that I became acquainted with that storyline. What is the storyline? Well, the storyline is that there is about 6,000 years ago, an entity, a male entity known as God, who created the universe in 7 days, in 6 days, and he rested on the seventh day, which is the Sabbath. And that, as most of you listening here know that story of Adam and Eve created, and then the rebellion from the Garden of Eden. They were chased, and then we talked about some of the holes that we identified very early in that story, but that's the story. And for all intents and purposes, I should also add that this God did not just come as some spirit entity that is faceless, colorless to me. No. In my experience growing up in Haiti, God was white. It's a very strange situation because everybody else around me was black. But whether it is inside of churches, in the books, the literature that I was reading, once I became aware of this entity called God, it was odd to me that it doesn't look like anybody around me, except that every now and again, there were white priests that would come to the church where my parents worshipped. And so the God that I was acquainted with, who was on television, I didn't really have a television when I was very little, but later on in life, we had a small black and white TV. It was still a white God that was in there, okay? And so in the Holy Trinity Church, as I mentioned, it was African abolitionists who created that church, that Episcopalian church in Haiti. But even them, when they were representing God in the Holy Trinity Cathedral, as you can see in that fresco there, you can see that there is a desire to put some color on Jesus on the cross, but he's still not the same shade as most Haitians in Haiti. And of course, he must have the long hair that very few of us had. And these are not dreads. These are, white people hair, okay? That was the idea. And that is the case for Jesus. It's the case for God the Father. It's the case for Mary. It's the case for the angels. And the artists, such as those who did those fresco in Holy Trinity Cathedral, whenever they put someone of darker shade, it is kind of like a revolutionary or a rebellious type of effort in a country where everybody's black. Anyway, so that's the context. I grew up in a neo-colonial environment where God is white, and that is just accepted, and it was meant to be seen as something that's unimportant. It just so happens, mind you, that Haiti is a country created out of a revolt, a revolution of Africans who liberated themselves from enslavers including Christian enslavers who were themselves priests and slave owners. And so you will see why growing up, this storyline early on created discomfort for me. I was not then aware of the conflicts in the United States in the 60s and the 40s, where even people march, white people saying that they don't want colored people in their church because to them this is their church. And when they write Jesus saves, they're not talking about other people, they're talking about themselves because they see their God as belonging to them. And so it was not surprising that the Ku Klux Klan and were welcome in churches in the United States, when at the same time it was a case of segregation. They're saying that the most segregated time is the Sunday morning in the United States. Well, in the case of myself growing up in Haiti, it's rather in the environment. The people who were powerful tended to be of lighter skin, therefore closer to God. That was just evident in the surrounding. Now, the storyline is, of course, something that you try to influence. And so, as I introduced to you in the first episode, I tried to correct what I saw to be problematic with the fact that the God that I was being introduced to had nothing to do in terms of physical appearance with my people, in terms of resemblance, but rather resemble those that my people fought in order to gain their freedom, which is an evident paradox. And so in that first painting, actually not the first one, because the first one I just did, I stuck to the image that I was given, the 12 white people surrounding the white God, and that was supposed to be the Last Supper. And like I said, most Haitians had an image of sort of that kind in their living room somewhere. If it wasn't in their living room, it was in a book, it was somewhere in a magazine, it was on the public transportation, inside of the churches, etc. And so, yes, there was always in my mind a problem with this. And I can recall becoming a teenager when the Jehovah Witness would come in front of the gate of our house on Wood Dedal. I would patiently, I was very curious and wanting to understand, what is our relationship with this God? And could we have been the chosen people? Because everybody wants to be the chosen people, right? You don't want to be the people that are not chosen. And so when the Jehovah Witness would come, and I'd go over the pages with them, and I'd say, well, like all of these are white people in those pages of the Watchtower and stuff. Like, I don't understand this. You guys look like me, and you are peddling something that doesn't offer me any opportunity to be late. And they would invariably say, well, this is not important. We're talking about the kingdom of God. And when we go there won't be any black, any white. Everybody will be the same. And, and so, well, but you say that the person you're talking about, Jesus, was on earth. When he was on earth, what color was he? Well, this is not important. He wasn't black. He wasn't white. We don't know what it was. Anyway, the story was always very unsatisfying. And as you can see, I shared earlier the tomb of Scipio Africanus. This was not a trivial matter for people who grew up under the period of the Mahatma racial slavery. This was something that was internalized. If you Google the tomb of Scipio Africanus, you will see that I believe it's near Bristol in the UK. This young African, I think he was buried around 18 or something like that. He asked that this be written on his tombstone. Essentially, he is thanking his Lord on earth who introduced him to his Lord in heaven. And he's waiting. He says, though he is, dark on this earth, when he sees God, he'll become light. That's what he asked to put on his tombstone. So it is not surprising that in 2025, you would see reports that church is still segregated in most cities of North America, for instance, where basically white people worship with white people and then black people with black people. And if you see white people in a black church, they are the ones who are the pastors, the leaders, and then black people have been conditioned to accept white leadership, but the reverse is seldom something that is accepted. I always had a problem with that because the concept of God, the God that was being sold as being one that is benevolent, that is good, in our language in Haitian Creole, we actually don't even just say God, we say good God. You cannot separate good from God. God by nature, that's something that I didn't discuss last week when we were defining, what is the definition of God? Mine is very, very limited. It has nothing to do with the Judeo-Christian God. I don't. You will see why in the coming weeks when we discuss this. Why I completely reject this ethnocentric, racist, sexist, paranoid, non-scientific, childish, barbaric God. I'm not into that thing. But even in our growing up, we were always, questioning how come in the Eurocentric paradigm there doesn't seem to be this restriction put on God. Because for us, Haitians, we say bon Dieu, good God. In other words, our God has no choice but to be good. He cannot do things that are bad. Our God has to be good. But that is also a fundamental difference. And we will see that there is no requirement for the Judeo-Christian God to be good. Powerful, almighty, yes. But good is not a restriction that the Europeans had put on their God. And again, I say the Europeans had put on their God because this is the version that I grew up with, that I was introduced with. And so I share this slide here where people say, well, but what about the Ethiopian Enoch, the Queen of Sheba, and the Black Popes, to signify the fact that no, the church has not always been 100% white, and there are black elements featured in the Bible. The presence of Christianity and Judaism in Ethiopia in the formative years of these sects is a matter of history. However, it is irrelevant for the fact that the brand of Christianity that is practiced in current times all over the world is white supremacist superstition masquerading as universal spirituality. And so I state that there's a logical reason why the leaders of the global Catholic and Protestant churches are almost 100% white males. There is historical continuity in the violent whiteness of the faith shared by Adolf Hitler, Leopold I, Elizabeth I, David Duke, and the KKK. The fact that Africans who survived European slavery and colonization accept to sit docile in a church filled by 6,000 Black Africans with a white Jesus crucifix to which they kneel and pray is explained not by the presence of Ethiopian bishops in the early church, but by the very lasting impact of Elizabeth and John Hawkins' real Jesus, that is, the slave ship. This is something that I posted back in 2019, and honestly, there is nothing that I would change in that quote. This slide is to present the fact that white supremacy sometimes people misunderstand as something that white people do. No, that's not what it is. It's a system. Just like racial slavery established a hierarchy where only the whites were not to be enslaved, the sacredness of the white life was understood by everybody else. But they made it fair game for everybody else to be enslaved. And so, yes, there were people of African descent who participated in racial slavery, enslaving other Africans, enslaving mixed race people. That happened. You saw it in the film 12 Years a Slave. You saw it in the history of New Orleans. And so, but not only that, the very folks who are victimized by white supremacy can advocate in favor of white supremacy. A case in point, a man named James Earl Carter. Yes, he shared the exact same name as the late US president. He published a book in 1997 titled No Apology Necessary. And this guy is now in the group of televangelists who have this thing called the 7,000 Club. You know, some of the stuff that you will hear these people express is so outrageous, racist, ridiculous, but it serves a purpose for the state to tolerate this nonsense. And so this man, in his book, and I have a quote here. I am glad the ships came. That's what he said. If the ships had not come, we might still be in the jungle. God loved me too much to leave me over there. God has brought you out. Of course, Earl Carter probably had never gone to Africa and to understand the rich culture of science and technology. Basically, almost every knowledge that we have in modern world comes from Africa. Whether it is the algebra, these people did not build those pyramids without the knowledge of how to measure the size of a triangle. Okay? And so Earl Carter is not alone, unfortunately, in terms of the number of Africans who accepted not only that they are not the chosen people, but they are given a favor. And that's basically the idea that, okay, so God had his chosen people, the chosen people rebelled. He sent his own son to die on the cross, and by the son dying, that is Jesus, then now the rest of the world is given a favor to become now sons of God. So the other ones were natural sons of God, but now because of the sacrifice of Jesus, somehow, who knew that he was God, that, even if they kill him, he's going to come back again, but still, they make the story make sense somehow that this is the redemption. Of course, later on, other folks will write about how this is very much plagiarized from other mythologies that other people have established long ago namely the myth of Mithra or the Osiris story, and so we will get into that in the future weeks when we're going to talk about how the Christian religion got created. But suffice it to say that many of the Africans, such as Earl Carter and people that I grew up with, accepted the idea that the whites are saying that this is our religion, and we accept that we are second-rate citizens. Like, yeah, we're not exactly the children of God, but through Jesus, we will get a seat, And so let's take a look at some verses, because it could be, and as some have argued, that, well, yeah, the Europeans wanted to conduct slavery, and so, they claim that, that the story about Ham and being cursed, and therefore that's what justifies racial slavery, etc. But it goes beyond that. I understand that the Europeans, established what they call the slave Bibles, where they put verses that are in favor, that seem to suggest that enslavement is encouraged and is divinely ordained. But it wasn't just white supremacist propaganda. It is mainstream Christianity. It wasn't fringe as you go and you study the Bible. So I'm going to just share with you two Bible verses, two sets of Bible verses, but I submit to you that the Bible is filled with evidence that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is exactly meant to be that. It is not the God of Shaka Zulu. It's not the God of Martin Luther King. It's not the God of Jafrikayiti. It's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And in our language, we have a word called sawant, risquier. Is someone who's trying to get a ride into somebody else's business. Okay? But when the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob speaks, it is clear that it is speaking on behalf of its chosen people. For instance, in Leviticus 25, verses 42 to 46, let us listen again. And here I call on the voice of my son, Jafrikayiti, to do the reading for us. Aha. If I'm to do that, I have to bring up the volume so that you can hear Mr. Lamukaji. Okay, let us go again.
Out of Egypt, they must not be sold as slaves. Do not rule over them ruthlessly, but fear your God. Your male and female slaves are to come from the nations around you. From them you may buy slaves. You may also buy some of the temporary residents living among you and members of their clans born in your country, and they will become your property. You can bequeath them to your children as inherited property and can make them slaves for life, but you must not rule over your fellow Israelites ruthlessly. Leviticus 25, verses 42 to 46.
So clearly here, this is establishing,
because the Israelites are my servants, whom
a differentiation between the Israelites, who should not be enslaved, and everybody else for whom it is fair game, and you can do to them as you wish. And we could go on all kinds of other references to illustrate this further, but I don't think that's necessary. Most people are familiar with some of these verses, but I wanted to illustrate with that one. As well as in the next one, which is the story of Joshua, who they say was trying to take over other people's lands. But here, these are not the actions of just Joshua, the individual, but it's Joshua and the Almighty God together working to steal the people's land. Okay? And here it tells you, as they fled before Israel on the road down from Beth Horon to Azekah, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them, and more of them died from the hail than were killed by the swords of the Israelites. On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Aijalon." So the sun stood still and the moon stopped till the nation avenged itself on its enemies. And as it is written in the book of Jashar, the sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a human being. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. In our culture in Haiti, after you would utter something like that, you're supposed to say, "Epi yo ba mo ti coup de pied, vin tombe la." That's like a bold lie, you say, you know, to explain that it is storytelling. Of course, there's no such thing that ever happened. The sun is not revolving around the earth, as you all know now. The sun is moving, but it's moving in the Milky Way, okay? And it's the earth that is moving around the sun. And as you know, Galileo, who tried to prove this, was declared anathema by the church and persecuted for that, etc. But this is the thinking of non-scientific human beings at the time, trying to justify some phenomenon that they might have observed, you know, like we know that there are solar eclipses, etc. But the fact is, they're using storytelling to justify crimes of imperialism committed by their people. And you will see why this is important to discuss today, because this has not stayed in the past. The same ridiculous ideas are recycled generation after generation. That's why this kind of discussion is important. Again, like I mentioned, so I was introduced to this God that has a chosen people, and that doesn't really make any excuses for doing that. Okay, and you know, most people kind of accepted that. And so when I was, you know, doing my research on Christianity, Judaism, Islam, everywhere I turned, it was always evident to me that it's either the Arabs, the Jews, the Semites, or the Europeans talking about themselves. And it's very narcissistic. So, for instance, you know, I was trying to find out, you know, where are the discussions of African civilization in the Bible? I mean, these pyramids have been there in everybody's face all of these centuries. There's no mention of them in the Bible. Like, how could that be? And so I started to follow the work of Herbert W. Armstrong, who used to publish this thing called The Plain Truth, because they pretended to try to identify through prophecy, what is written in the book of Revelation pertaining to current day. And of course, I think many people, when they are growing up and interested in religion, one of the most fascinating part of religion is prophecy. And because people want to be special, you want to be part of the chosen people. You want to also be, some of the few people on earth who are revealed, who are special information to you by God. That's how the prophets are created. And all of these gurus who established their own churches being offshoots of either the Catholic Church or the Protestant churches, etc. So Herbert W. Armstrong was one of those guys, an old man. And in his book, he was always identifying the beast of the apocalypse. What is the animal with the seven heads and whatever. I don't recall the details right now, because really, I think I have come to my conclusion with regards to all this nonsense. But the thing is, the nations that Herbert W. Armstrong used to identify are either the United States. I believe he identified as Manasseh, and UK as Ephraim, or vice versa. Really don't care. But in any case, it's white people, again, at the center of the story all the time. And so when I finally found them discussing issues pertaining to Africa, here's an issue of The Plain Truth in 1980. And lo and behold, when you go and you read the book, it's all talking about the transfer from white power Rhodesia to Zimbabwe. And the text is all about propaganda, hoping that Mugabe is not going to persecute the whites. Basically, the same stuff that you probably would have seen on American television at the time, or radio. The preoccupation is not about the African people who have just suffered decades and upon decades of humiliation, devastation, murders, mass murders in their own land, but rather, the precious white people, what will happen to them now that power is transferred to the native Africans. And that was also what was in The Plain Truth. And when you read, what they were printing, it was all about, that the Africans need to realize that it's in the next world, when Jesus comes back, that's when everything will be made right. They should not put too much hope, on Mugabe and this and that and the other thing. And so this kind of encouraged me to pursue my research into understanding, is Christianity salvable for me? Can I ever reconcile the fact that I am an African born from those Africans who revolted against white supremacy in Haiti, and accept to sit in a church where all of the heroes are white, including the gods, and that I'm going to go in some kind of heaven where somehow I'm supposed to hope that there's going to be equality, fairness, and all of that? Well, when no one has really promised me that's how it's going to be, But in any case, that's the environment in which I grew up, and the conclusions. Why is this important in 2025? Well, because there is a genocide happening in Gaza, and some folks, are justifying these murders, genocides, on the same ideas, ridiculous ideas that we saw in Leviticus 25, verses 42, 46. And so when you find a man like Albert Einstein who was quoted in his famous God letter, published in that he wrote actually in 1954. Just a small quote here, and I really encourage you to go and check out this letter. It's a very profound letter. I mean, you know, Albert Einstein was a human being, so I'm not putting anybody that I reference here as, you know, gurus or people who should be, you know, worshipped and put in pedestals, etc. No, he was a brilliant scientist, but he was also a humanist with all his flaws. But some of the things that he said here, I think, should cause us to pause in 2025. And I wonder what Albert Einstein would have said if he was alive today. What risk he would have taken when we see what's happening in universities in Canada, in the United States, everywhere, where essentially people are being harassed because they are saying the genocide has to stop. And somehow, if you say that, if you advocate for the survival of the people of Palestine who are in their own land, just like the Amalekites were in their own land when Joshua attacked them and tried to steal their land, well, they tell you you're being anti-Semite. So easy to say stupidities like that when you have so many people who are scared shitless with no spine to stand for truth. And so when people ask, well, how could racial slavery last all of these hundreds of years? Well, that's exactly how it lasted. People got scared and they refused to stand for truth, for justice. The genocide in the Congo is happening under the same ideas. The natural resources that exist in the Congo, some people, and it's not a whole bunch of people, it's a gang of people on the planet who decides that, you know, the gold of the Congo should not be enjoyed by the people of the Congo. The lithium of Bolivia should not be enjoyed by the native people of Bolivia. The gold of Haiti should not be enjoyed by the people of Haiti. The petroleum of Venezuela, not by the natives of Venezuela. And so they conspire and try to steal the people's land. And some religious fanatics are using ridiculous ideas that are not scientifically proven, that are not historically proven, to justify their things. And so Albert Einstein said, for me, the unadulterated Jewish religion is, like all other religions, an incarnation of primitive superstition. And the Jewish people to whom I gladly belong, and in whose mentality I feel profoundly anchored, still for me does not have any different kind of dignity from all other peoples. As far as my experience goes, they are in fact no better than other human groups, even if they are protected from the worst excesses by a lack of power. Of course, he's speaking here in 1954, which is no longer the case in 2025. Otherwise, I cannot perceive anything chosen about them. End of quote. My last slide for today in terms of references is only 3 of them. I encourage you to visit Brother Jeremiah Kamara's series, Slave Sermons. It's on YouTube. It's really well done. It speaks to how Africans were introduced to Euro-Christianity. And again, like I mentioned in my earlier slide, I am well aware that Christianity was in Africa way before the European attacks on Africa, but that doesn't change the fact of white supremacy being well intertwined in the Judeo-Christian tradition that is currently being propagated among our people. It's not a coincidence that Christianity is all wrapped up in white, in whiteness, like Walter Wadney would have said. Vive Mon Dieu à Religion is currently available only in Haitian Creole, but you will soon be able to access it in English. I wanted to just return to the slide here with Earl Carter. You know, there's a little quote here that I wish I will be able to enlarge this in order to read it for you, where he says, "The black slaves in America gained their freedom eventually. This historic struggle for liberation set a precedent for the whole world. God sent deliverers such as Abraham Lincoln and Martin Luther King to release the people, both white and black, from the horrid reality of the curses on them. Freedom and deliverance for blacks everywhere begun in the United States. Like ripples on a pond, the struggle for liberation has now traveled to other parts of the world, such as South Africa." Now, this is a characteristic of that ridiculous superstition that really renders people so stupid that they lie, and they express bold-faced lies with no concern that this is in a book, that people are going to read this and easily tell Earl Carter, "You're lying." No, it's not in the United States that Africans were liberated first. Racial slavery, officially, okay, you're talking about 1865 in the United States. The Haitian Revolution was all done in 1803. That's why some of my ancestors who were enslaved in the United States left the United States to go and find refuge in Haiti. And the revolts that were taking place weren't just taking place in Haiti, they took place in Brazil, they took place everywhere. And so to stand here as a black man, you know, yeah, of course, they give you the title of pastor. And of course, the slavers really enjoyed having people like Earl Carter on the plantations, because then they can, you know, maintain the population subdued and keep them away from revolting. Although sometimes it backfired, because some of these ministers, okay, like Dan McVesey and others, actually used the pulpit, okay, to awaken the masses to the unacceptability of their condition. But of course, the man in that little quote that I gave you lied so many times. Now, it's referring to South Africa, whereas those who studied the situation of apartheid South Africa know that the governments of the United States, successive governments of the United States, of Canada, of England, all supported the apartheid regime in South Africa. Yes, Canada included. Yes, you will read all kinds of propaganda telling you that it's not the case, it's different. Go and verify the facts. White supremacy has always been constant in its solidarity in evil, whether it is in South Africa, whether it is in Australia, whether it is in Latin America, whether it is in the rest of Africa. Just like, you know, they came together to assassinate Patrice Lumumba, they came together to undo the democratic process in Haiti. And in all of these instances, the churches were involved. Many of the coups in Latin America are planned inside of the Catholic nuncio. I will develop more about that in the future weeks, but just wanted to illustrate again the bold-faced lies of Earl Carter, who, by the way, still preaches on a regular basis with the 700 Club of so-called pastors. However, I unfortunately don't have the book here. I wanted to point out that there's an actual scholar who has written a book that just came out. I'm talking about Marlene Doe. It's titled The First and Last King of Haiti, focused on Henri Christophe. Earl Carter should take a look at that book to find out what real abolitionists were doing in the Caribbean when people like Abraham Lincoln were paying lip service to the idea of freedom, when in reality all they were trying to do is preserve white supremacy by any means necessary, including, gradual transformation of the system of neocolonialism. This is all I had to share with you today. I will end with another little excerpt from the Bible.
Slaves, reverent fear of God, submit yourselves to your masters, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. For it is commendable if someone bears up under the path of unjust suffering because they are conscious of God. But how is it to your credit if you receive a beating for doing wrong and endure it? But if you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable before God. To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. 1 Peter 2, verses 18 to 21. Slaves, reverent fear of God, submit yourselves to your masters, not only to those who are good and considerate, but also to those who are harsh. For it is commendable if someone bears up under the path of unjust suffering because they are conscious of God. But how is it to your credit if you receive a beating for doing wrong and endure it? But if you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable before God. To this you were called, because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow in his steps. 1 Peter 2, verses 18 to 21.
Women should remain silent in the churches. They are not allowed to speak, but must be in submission, as the law says. If they want to inquire about something, they should ask their own husbands at home. For it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church.
Samuel said to Saul, I am the one the Lord sent to anoint you king over his people Israel. So listen now to the message from the Lord. This is what the Lord Almighty says. I will punish the Amalekites.
Jésus, par ton sang précieux, enlève mon iniquité. Regarde-moi sur les cieux, dis-moi que tu m'as pardonné. J'ai longtemps erré cœur rebelle, mais j'entends ta voix qui m'appelle. Au pied de ta croix maintenant, tout confus, brisé, je me rends. Blanc, blanc, plus blanc que neige, blanc, plus blanc que neige, lavé dans le sang de l'agneau, je serai plus blanc que la neige.
Now go, attack the Amalekites, and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put to death men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. 1 Samuel 15.